Hello, my name is Sean Martin, and I am with the Coalition to Save Aunt Fanny's Cabin. Today, we will be talking about Fanny Williams, her legacy, and the cabin, and the many, many reasons why the cabin should be saved. This is a compilation of historical information and images to garner support for the preservation of the spirit and presence of Aunt Fanny's cabin. So we always start this presentation with, "We need your help." The city of Smyrna voted to relinquish, relocate, demolish Aunt Fanny's cabin to a third-party group through an RFP process. And so what our work is to raise public awareness so that people understand the real and true and complete history of Aunt Fanny's cabin so that the negative stigma that's associated with this cabin will be cleared up. There is no question that there is an air of negativity that goes with the cabin. However, the origin story is one that not too many people hear about. And so we look to share this information with you today. So I'd like to start off with how I came into Aunt Fanny. Fanny Williams was a pioneer in the Smyrna community. And basically, she was a woman who was determined to help her community at all means necessary, whatever it took. I had a Toastmasters assignment where I had to assume the character of a historical figure, and I thought that she was the perfect person a person to emulate, to write a speech towards. I had to understand where she was coming from, her contributions to society, and to send a message. And so I went to work, tried to research her background, and unfortunately there was not much available. So what I did with the little information that I had was I paired what made sense and the image of this photo. What you see in front of you is a woman who took great pride in her craft. She took great pride in what she did, how she moved through the space of the cabin. You could just look at the creases in her apron that are so sharp that you could cut a finger on it, or the shine to her shoes, or the swollen ankles. How she has her hands placed in her lap in a very ladylike manner, the resolve in her eyes and the expression on her face. All of these things told me so much about her, about who she was, where she came from, and how she moved through the space of Aunt Fanny's cabin. And so why save the cabin? And how does this relate to the woman herself? This is one of my favorite quotes that I love to use whenever I am talking about the reasons to save the cabin. Fanny Williams' proud strength represents the best of Smyrna's people. The old sharecropper's cabin remains the last one in Smyrna. Both survived an era intertwined by divergent paths. Ms. Williams' bold community contributions set a stage for the civil rights movement. Community contributions set a stage for the civil rights movement while the cabin's restaurant life withered. Their storied history cannot be separated, but united as a central location for reconciliation and peace. Both Fanny Williams and the cabin that once misappropriated her name are Smyrna. With that, I'd like to talk a little bit about Smyrna and way back in the day when racism was overt and a part of everyday culture. Long ago, Smyrna prided itself for having a 0% Black population, which is very different from where we are right now. As a matter of fact, in 1988, Smyrna was dubbed as a redneck city in the National Geographic publication. And on this next table, you will see, if we scroll down on the significant dates, Aunt Fanny's cabin was actually still in operation in 1988. And so it's no wonder that they would say these things. And some of the images that we look at from here forward, you will see why they came to that conclusion. But first, let's talk about a few significant dates. 1868, Fanny Williams was born to formerly enslaved parents. She was never a slave. In 1891, the small shop selling jams and jellies was opened. And here is a slide of Isoline Campbell, the woman who was responsible for creating the cabin, Aunt Fanny's cabin. Aunt Fanny's cabin was originally a place where the farmhands were allowed to sell their wares, the jams, the jellies, the crops. And it was also a place, because Isoline Campbell was a wealthy socialite, where she would often have tea parties. And so from that point, in 1941, December 3rd, the restaurant opened, and it was called Aunt Fanny's Cabin as well. So Aunt Fanny's Cabin actually started off as a shop, small boutique selling jams and jellies, and went from that to the restaurant in 1941, exactly 50 years later. At that time, Aunt Fanny was actually 73 years old. And so you wonder what happened. How did this cabin fall into her name, number one? What was the relationship between she and Isoline, number two? And then number three, how did the negative stigma of the restaurant and this sense of place come to be? So the first thing that I would like to say is Isoline was a young woman whose mother and father died when she was a very young woman. Aunt Fanny held a position in Isoline's life where she was a mother figure to Isoline. Aunt Fanny Williams, was actually 3 years different in age from her mother. So she absolutely was a mother figure, especially in their absence, since they both passed away when she was a young woman. And so there is no question, because of the relationship with Isoline and her influence in her life, Isoline Campbell was said to have founded the Junior League, which is a group that was committed to the betterment of children and women, underserved children and women of the day. Fanny Williams played a major part in the moral development of Isoline Campbell, to the point where she felt the need to be a change agent in her community. And so with this, I pitch an idea, a thought, that Aunt Fanny's Cabin originated from a place of reconciliation, understanding where slavery was, the Jim Crow laws, all of those things, the Jim Crow era, all of those things, and how that overt oppression of a people could resonate in the heart of a young woman who was being raised by what others would consider to be of a subservient class. So Fanny Williams had an influence in that. The church that you see here, the Wheat Street Baptist Church, Fanny Williams was also a major donor source for this building, located in the heart of a Black community in the city of Atlanta. There's no question that, again, Fanny Williams and her connection with the cabin, they were able to establish a reputation, a brand, if you will, that allowed her to do something as amazing as being a major source of donors for the Wheat Street Baptist Church. In addition, she was also a major donor source of fundraising for the Cobb Cooperative, which is Cobb's first Black hospital. And if you could imagine, again, that would be 1948. At that time, Blacks would be turned away from receiving the kind of medical care that they deserved. And so what she did was she inserted herself again into a need and made it happen. And so with that, a year later, she passed away, and Aunt Fanny's cabin continued. Some of the images here are from the cabin's early beginnings, and the cabin actually sat off of Campbell Road near the border of Smyrna. These are some excerpts from articles that we have collected, and from here we have a slide that shows what the boys in the cabin actually looked like. And it's important to show these images because there's so much negative history that goes along with this story. What happens is the boys with the menu boards, the very reason why the city of Smyrna wants to get rid of this building, that era did not happen when Fanny Williams was alive. This image actually shows what those boys looked like when she was still alive. This next slide shows you what they looked like under when the restaurant was under the ownership of others. So the menu boards, what happens is after Aunt Fanny died, the cabin was sold shortly after that to another person, and they enacted some things in the restaurant that were unbecoming to both Isoline and Fanny Williams. This is an image of a boy with a menu board around his head, and what they would do, the boys would sing and dance the daily specials and entertain their white patrons. The restaurant, to me, in my eyes, Disneyfied, a derivative of the word or the place Disney. It created a space where the old Dixie South was celebrated. And so this was a place that actually became very popular. People were coming from all over the nation to partake in this awesome entertainment. There's another picture of a boy with the menu boards around his head, catering to his white patrons. And again, these are negative images and the sole reasons why the city wants to remove the building. This is the menu boards a little later on in the life of the restaurant. No more holes through the boards, but just menu boards that would be carried around. And so that little bit of paraphernalia here from the cabin. This is an article that was published when Aunt Fanny's Cabin, the restaurant, actually came to be. If you notice the date, 1941, Aunt Fanny was, I believe, in her 70s at the time, and it was a successful restaurant. These are some images of the plans when the building was right around the World War II. So you see some of the expansion from the sharecroppers' cabin, and these are some images of the elevations. And this right here, this is the money shot. I call this the money shot because in all of my reading, I read where she was the major donor source for these two initiatives, but had no idea that the power of this image, how floored I would be just looking at it. because when I see this image, I see my mom, I see my auntie, I see my grandmother, I see all the Black women who live in their communities with one foot in white corporate America and with the other foot solidly ingrained in their communities, making a difference either in their households or beyond in their communities. So this shot is Aunt Fanny at a groundbreaking for the first Black hospital called the Cobb Cooperative, which was located in Marietta. And so this was an indication and proof to me that she was an effective leader. She made things happen. And there's no question, again, if we go back to the origin story of Aunt Fanny's Cabin, there is some level of reconciliation in the origin of Aunt Fanny's Cabin that enabled this Black woman who was born years after slavery ended to accomplish the things that she had. And what that means is she used her brand as Aunt Fanny to garner the donations she needed to accomplish the two major initiatives, the construction of the Wheat Street Baptist Church, as well as the first Black hospital. And this is the history that not a lot of people know about. And this is the important history. When I think about my children, when I think of my kids and the things that they are seeking to do in life, this one image is an image of you can do all things if you put your heart and mind and your soul into it. And I truly believe that that is what Fanny Williams represented. And so what is Smyrna today? Today, Smyrna is actually what I would call a success story, where originally we talked about how Smyrna prided itself in being a 0% Black population, where today it is actually a majority city, where the white population is less than the rest of the nationalities. That is an accomplishment all by itself. And there have been moves to to make that happen, from Rose Garden Hills community, Davenport town, those things being annexed into the city and not drawn, their lines drawn to make sure that they keep those communities out of Smyrna. They were included somewhere, I think, in the not sure, 60s, maybe 70s. But we also passed a non-discrimination ordinance, which the ordinance specifically protects against discrimination by race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, so forth and so on. That is not something that every city has. But this is, again, a testament to Smyrna's willingness to want to be a diverse community that is unashamed of the entire makeup of our beautiful city. And then finally, we have Smyrna approves the resolution to denounce racism after the killing of George Floyd. And I want to mention also the Racial Trust Building Initiative. We have our second meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And this is something that is modeled after LaGrange, Georgia, where it brings the community together to talk about the dynamics, what happens when you are discriminated against, or what are those voids in your understanding of the other race, so that it can bring people together. And Aunt Fanny's Cabin was the perfect place to do that and to have these types of conversations. So Smyrna wants to relinquish the building to a third party. We have until March 16th, 2022, the new deadline for the proposals. And so what does the cabin look like? Well, today it sits right next to our Smyrna History Museum, which happens to be the perfect location for Aunt Fanny's cabin. This is a view looking across Atlanta Road. The cabin sits right adjacent to the museum and is, again, the perfect location. This 132-year-old sharecropper cabin converted into a shop/restaurant has withstood the test of time from World War I, World War II, and all the storm issues, being moved and relocated to another location, the Depression era. This building represents a level of resilience that mirrors what the indomitable will of the human spirit looks like. It is a physical representation of what a culture could be, despite those things that continue to work and chew away at it. They say that there are structural issues. They should be repaired. They say that there are mold issues. They should be repaired. This building is still standing, and yet it is threatened to be removed. So, these pictures were taken January 25th, 2022. The building outside looks not as good as it does on the inside, but these are just some detailed photos of what the cabin looks like today. These are some shutters, standard construction from way back when. I believe these are the original windows. And this is what the interior looks like. So they claim that this building is structurally unsound, dilapidated structure. Ladies and gentlemen, I would beg to differ that this building actually looks pretty darn good to be 132 years old. So more images. This is an image of on the left here is an image of the original fireplace. The image on the right shows some of the original furniture that was in the house proper. We've got shiplap walls, which was a pretty standard construction type for that era. We've got a beadboard type ceiling system at the top, and you'll notice the windows in the background that show shelving that span across each window. I believe that these were shelves that put the wares of the farmhands, their jams, their jellies, their produce. This was what they considered as display shelving. So it definitely is a structure that served its purpose, and we definitely want it to stay. The image to the left is a temporary support wall that was placed there because the beams are actually falling or failing. Unfortunately, this temporary support wall was removed. We are trying desperately to get the city to put it back because there are cracks along where the top member spans from beam to beam. There is a crack in each one of those beams marching down the space. We feel like the city should at least go ahead and do that. Some of these images are just more details of what the inside of the space looks like. To the right is not the original fireplace. I was told that this fireplace was actually constructed after the building was placed here. But this is the fireplace that they want to remain here when or if the building goes away. So the city of Smyrna wants this fireplace that was constructed in the late 90s to be the final remnant of Aunt Fanny's cabin. So, and that part is lots of questions there. So the city of Smyrna says they don't do historic preservation. There is a Reed House restoration where the purchase price and the restoration price totaled $3.1 million. Totally different scale. And I love the quote that Mayor Max Bacon put in here in an article that announced its opening. It's a beautiful old house, and if not for us, it wouldn't be here, Bacon said. It's one of the oldest houses left in Smyrna. Redevelopment is good, but you need to save some of your history. And I underlined that last part because the cabin allows us the ability to see a reflection of where we came from. And without that reflection, we sort of lose our GPS system of just it constantly improving as a people, as a society. And so with that, I just wanted to share some of the estimated costs that came through in some of the companies that submitted proposals, and the what they propose to do in some instances is demo and then renovate. Another one is to keep and renovate. Another one is to demo and rebuild. And I think the first one by Lexden is actually demo and rebuild for $675,000. And so we are just really wanting to raise awareness about Fanny Williams, about the cabin, about how this is a precious gem that the city of Smyrna can actually use to reclaim its narrative, to reclaim the space, to repurpose the history so that the lesson that it shares is actually one that lifts you up, that educates and enlightens our young people, to let them know that there are possibilities if you are of a right space and place of mind to do some amazing things. And so some of the potential opportunities we've identified could be place a proper marker on her grave at Southview Cemetery. I'm told that her grave is in the public grounds portion of Southview, which means that that was an area where Blacks that could not afford a proper burial would be buried. However, the care of that has been left to ruin, and unfortunately, the quality of the boxes that the bodies were buried in have caved in, is what I'm told. And so the likelihood of her grave still being intact and her marker still identifiable is close to nil. But we can do something about that. They offer a service that could help. City of Smyrna could add additional information to their website to share with citizens. Major corporations could fund a college scholarship like the Fanny Williams Culinary Scholarship. We could develop Fanny Williams Center for Justice and Reconciliation. Or we could develop the Fanny Williams Institute of Culinary Arts. And finally, which I think is the best option that involves the city, is to create a public-private partnership that speaks to the spirit of the people, this awesome origin story, and creating something that would be here and present for generations to come. And so with that, I want to say that it has been a pleasure sharing this presentation with you, and I hope that you would take the opportunity to consider where we've come, how far we've come as a people. And I pray that you are inspired by what you have heard, and hopes to encourage you to fight for those things that have meaning, have depth, that could add to our culture, our greater understanding of who we are and why we are. And if we can do that together as a people on one accord, I think we're winning. Thank you.